there's some very significant technology platforms that are based here. Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent. And then there is a very significant push, as you all know, on artificial intelligence. $150 billion AI industry commitment by 2030, and a lot being done on connectivity. So just a bit of a context as we look through it. I think what's more interesting is to hear from the three speakers that we have today who are leaders, again, in iconic technology companies. We're going to start first with Sundar Pichai. Sundar is the CEO of Google, which is the umbrella company for Alphabet of all their internet services. It's amazing to see what Sundar has done in his time while he's there. He's led the product management innovation efforts for some of the most popular platforms and apps that includes Android, Chrome, Gmail, Drive, Maps. As you know, this is much beyond search. They've gone into cloud provision and are also now pushing the boundaries of AI on many dimensions. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Sundar to come and speak to us.
Good morning. It's great to be in China. It's always nice to see the optimism around tech and so many other industries here. This event is at the center of it all, and so thank you very much for including me alongside such distinguished guests. One of the amazing things about the computing industry is just when you think you understand it, everything changes and new possibilities unfold. Every 10 years or so, there's a major shift. In the early 1980s, the PC revolution made computers part of people's lives and changed how we work. Roughly a decade later, in the 1990s, the internet transformed how we find information. And then in the mid-2000s, smartphones brought all that knowledge into our pockets. Google played a big role in the last two shifts. And now we are in the midst of a third shift, the shift to AI. Each time, we have leaned into these shifts by opening our technology for everyone to use, because we believe good things happen when everyone's invited. Android is a powerful example of this in practice. We thought mobile phones would be better if everyone could build them together. So we created Android as an open platform. It all started with one device and one carrier, the T-Mobile G1, released in 2008. Now, Android spans more than 24,000 devices from more than 1,300 brands. And today, there are more than 2 billion active devices worldwide and 8 billion apps installed every month. Here in China, you've built amazing things with Android. You have incredible OEMs like Huawei, Xiaomi, Vivo, Oppo, and so on. And more importantly, a thriving community of developers. When we first started Android, we never imagined our platform would be used to rent bikes, hail cars, order dinner, and replace wallets. Yet this is all part of a daily life in Beijing. Even more exciting, what's developed in China today can be offered everywhere tomorrow. Here are just a couple of examples of Android developers sharing their apps globally. The founders of Castbox wanted to help people organize and discover podcasts. 2 years later, 9 million people outside of China used the app and spent an average of 90 minutes a day on it. Baby Bus was created by a father who wanted to build apps to entertain and educate his children. Now he's doing that for millions of children around the world with 100 apps that are available in 12 languages. He's crossed 150 million downloads. When we build together, we get to better ideas faster. It's a powerful lesson to apply to the next computing evolution, the shift to AI. Artificial intelligence is radically changing how people interact with computers. For the first time, computers are adapting to people rather than forcing people to adapt to computers. They are starting to become more sensitive to context. They learn from our behavior and speak our language. Because the shift is happening so seamlessly, people don't realize that they are using AI when they talk to their phones, search for photos, or translate text on their phones. These advances, while remarkable, just scratch the surface of what AI can do. To realize the global potential of this technology, we need a global community to unlock it. That's why we decided to create a new platform and invite everyone in again. 2 years ago, we built TensorFlow to make it possible for anyone to use AI. Already, we are seeing some incredible uses across industries and nations. I'd like to share a few examples, starting with agriculture. Our food systems depend on deep, specialized knowledge. Often, that knowledge resides within a small group of people. That's been hard to scale until now. Cassava, for example, is one of the most popular crops in the world, but it's vulnerable to diseases, and these diseases are very hard to detect. It used to take an expert with a trained eye to spot the early warning signs. Now, all it takes is a farmer with a trained camera on their smartphone. With TensorFlow, researchers have made it possible for anyone with a cheap smartphone to detect disease in cassava. We are seeing this kind of impact across the food industry. Dairy farmers in the Netherlands are using TensorFlow to detect diseases in cows at a very early stage. It's helping them keep their animals healthy and make their farms more efficient. And this is happening in other far-reaching areas such as space as well. As we explore the stars with telescopes, we are hitting a constraint that better equipment can't fix. We already have enough data here on Earth to find planets beyond our solar system. We just need more people with the expertise to see them. Last year, Google worked with NASA to apply AI to the problem, and we discovered 2 new exoplanets that had long been overlooked. Earlier this month, we opened up that code for any astronomer to use. The power of AI to find new planets, the same power can also help find aberrations within human cells. This will make it far easier for doctors to treat disease. Already, AI can detect some cancer cells with more accuracy than people. The next step will be to make disease detection and treatment more affordable. We have seen this start to happen with diabetic retinopathy. Even though it's inexpensive to treat, it's a leading cause of blindness. It takes a skilled doctor to spot it today. Because it's easy to miss, millions of people suffer who shouldn't have to. AI can change that equation. In 2016, Google developed a neural net that can spot diabetic retinopathy from relatively low-cost devices. This year, researchers found that the same system can also pick up signs of early heart disease. This needs to be further tested, but it shows the flexibility of AI and how instantly knowledge can be transferred and applied. In an open ecosystem, solving one problem quickly solves another. There is another common theme across all these advances. AI has the biggest impact when it expands human expertise. Openness allows us to scale that impact across industries and countries. No one company or country will be able to do this alone. Everyone has a role to play in it. China is already playing a big part in how AI will shape our futures. Chinese scientists have been prolific contributors to academic journals and have won numerous awards at ImageNet challenges. And when the Association for the Advancement of AI realized they scheduled their annual meeting on Chinese New Year, they rescheduled. The meeting wouldn't mean much without China's talent and insight. When it comes to AI, we want to work alongside the world's best talent. That's why we opened an AI center in Beijing last year. We've already got a small team doing research there and look forward to expanding it. There are so many exciting advances in AI happening in China. One of the most profound examples I've witnessed comes from outside the tech community. It involves the Grandmasters of Go, a game that's been around for more than 2,500 years. 1 year after Kaji's match with DeepMind's AlphaGo, the Grandmasters in China feel a new excitement for the game. AlphaGo has energized them and their students. They are now seeing parts of the game that had been hidden for centuries. Without AI, these strategies might have been hidden for centuries more. AlphaGo didn't take away anything from the Grandmasters. It made them stronger Go players. After his game, Keji remarked on how he had learned from it. We should explore our minds and expand our thinking, he said. Go player and commentator Shuing put it another way. Since the birth of AlphaGo, the world of Go has become more colorful. It has opened up a brand new perspective for us. And that's the power of this technology. It's allowing people everywhere to push the boundaries of what's known and share that knowledge with the global community. This is an incredible moment in computing and technology. I feel lucky to participate in it alongside doctors, astronomers, scientists, creators, developers, and Go players, and the people in this room and in this country. I believe the best is yet to come. Thank you.
Sundar, we have a couple of minutes to ask you a couple of questions. First, just on, you talked about how AI is affecting healthcare, ag, food. What are some of the industries that you think are going to be most affected by this or disrupted over the next 5 to 10 years?
I mean, I'm pretty sure it's obvious to most people here, but it truly is cross-cutting. I think any industry, which has data, will get transformed by AI. So we literally see no limit. I think it's something which will transform every sector as we know it. And what's exciting is we are seeing from our work as we start developing stuff, it easily translates across industries. And I think we are still in early days. Even things like education or manufacturing or energy, insurance, you name it, all sectors I think are ripe for seeing the benefits from AI.
And what time frame do you think, if you're a CEO of one of these organizations, how should you think about this? Like, what time frame do you have to be able to make the shift? Is it 5 years, 10 years? What?
I've worked in technology long enough not to predict the future, but I would say the first immediate step which I see a lot of industries taking is the transformation to cloud. And I think that's kind of a foundational transformation. And that is beginning to happen today. Many companies are at the forefront of this. And I think that's a very powerful transformation. But I think, the more cutting edge sectors have started deploying AI, and you will start seeing it play out, in the healthcare industry, maybe with electronic health records as an example. I think people are looking into how AI can help there. So, you'll see a wide variety of timelines, but things are beginning to happen now.
And in terms of the research that you're doing, is it roughly, I don't know if it was a way to is it what percent of revenue, or just how much effort is being put into, as you look ahead, quantum computing, whatever else that you're working on, just to get a sense of it?
As part of Google, you mean?
Yeah, part of Google.
There are, our research efforts are pretty substantial, so we do invest a lot of our cash flow back into research. But, not everything takes a lot of money. Areas like quantum computing, it's more finding the right people. So it's finding those talented PhDs, which are the bottleneck more than anything else.
The talent.
Yeah, the talent is the bottleneck.
Maybe a last question, Sundar. In the previous session, there was a discussion about disruption of workers with all of these changes going on. How do you sort of look at that with the workforce, training the workforce, reskilling the workforce for the future, given all these changes that are going on?
I think, basically a very complex topic, but two things. One is, I think, gone are the days where you can educate yourself once, and that's what takes you through the rest of your career. I think that's changing, and so, governments, educational institutions, all of us need to support and adapt to what we think of as reskilling continuously. There are work we are doing. So, for example, in the U.S., IT support jobs are a growing category, and you can retrain people in about a year for it. And it pays about the average median income, and so that's an example of where you can reskill a workforce. I think above all, I think what AI does offer is an ability for more people to gain deep expertise. And so, for example, if you're a radiologist in the future, you can actually spend more time on patient care and not spend most of your time today, and that's where most of the training goes in trying to decipher images and make sense of the data. I think we can help with that and actually get radiologists to spend more time with patient care, and hence, hopefully, more people can become radiologists. And I think I see that. We see this for geneticists. We can make that hard work to do data analysis, etc., much simpler, so that the focus shifts elsewhere. And so I think it'll be also easy to acquire new skills. So it's definitely going to be disruptive, but it also, I think, will impact in more positive ways than people imagine.
So complementary, but a need to sort of learn how to do that, but maybe more jobs down the road than we've had before, but different.
I think it's going to definitely be different, and societies will have to adapt. I think there are going to be newer ways by which we support the population. The good news is this change is going to happen over time, and I think it'll still take hopefully many decades.
Great. Well, thank you, Sundar. I have to do my own time management up here, but thank you very much for being with us today. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Switch over. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you again, Sundar. I now have the privilege of introducing Ginny Rometty. Ginny doesn't really need any introduction, neither does IBM, except I think what's interesting with IBM, we should not forget this, this is literally the U.S. business that has generated the most U.S. patents over time. And it's also, I think, for us incumbents, I think an inspiring example of an organization that's reinvented itself many, many times as they go through it, and again is advanced in many areas. I have to, if you don't mind me, say one thing, Ginny, which is again on the I think the edges of innovation. I think this month you just unveiled the world's smallest computer, which is smaller than a grain of salt, costing less than 10 cents to manufacture. We use blockchain technology and can be embedded into everyday devices. Again, just one of many, many examples. But Ginny, come on up and we'll look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Dominic. Thank you. And a pleasure to be here with everyone. And so I'm gonna take this up one level here. As I've been here the last couple days, and we've talked a lot about a new era. And so I actually want to talk about it as an era, not just one piece of technology. Because I actually think in this era, we're going to find ourselves confronting two very distinct inflection points. If I put up your charts here? No. Okay. I'm hitting some buttons. I don't know what I'm hitting. That we're going to find ourselves with two inflection points. So one is going to be an inflection point around the technology itself, but the second is an inflection point for society. And it's how we are going to react to all these new technologies. So let me do that in this period of time. First, the inflection point for technology. So what will it really fundamentally change, and how is this technology going to be different than the past? The second point I'd like to cover is, what does it enable here in China? And then third, perhaps most important, it will be the choices that we make as a society and the choices we make as a company and a country and how we're going to react to this technology. So let me start with this era, an inflection point. I actually think we're going to come over time and look back, and we won't call it an era of AI. I think it will be called an era of exponential learning. So if you allow me just a moment to give some context to what I mean by that. And it's a little bit of history, very little. But over the last 60 years, there's only been 2 times when technology has actually enabled a business to change exponentially versus just linearly improve. Most of the time, business improves linearly. One was something many people know of as Moore's Law, around 1965. And all it simply said was processing power would double every 18 months. And that gave rise to all of us putting computing in back office and everywhere we know it, to smartphones, to everything, to Internet of Things. And then it was about 30 years later, something that is now known as Metcalfe's Law happened. And all it said was that the value of a network would be equal to the square of the nodes on the network. That anticipated the web, and it gave rise to what everyone knows as platform companies. So next will be Baidu to speak, Alibaba, Tencent. Those were both exponential moments, and we are about to see another exponential moment. And so there is a new law taking hold. This one will be based on exponential data, actually. The value will not be the amount of data. It will not just be the value of the data. It will be the insights that come out of this data, and they will come from systems that are not programmed. They are systems that learn, and they'll be augmented. It'll be blockchain, it'll be quantum, there'll be many more things to come. But here's the point. What it will do is enable any company, any organization, to actually learn exponentially and make a decision better. Every single decision could be made better. Now, pause for a moment. What that means is in this next era, many companies can win. Many, not just a few. And so why do I say that? If I were to ask you what percentage of the world's data is available on the internet, I guarantee you I would get many different answers from you. The answer is only 20%. The other 80% is owned by every company in this room and around the world. And it is the most valuable data. It is supply chains, it's finances, it's histories, it's customers. This is the data that banks, retailers, hospitals all have. And with that data, they can transform themselves. They can transform themselves. Incumbent companies can become disruptors. So what does this mean for China? What will this era, which Dominic, you asked the question, this is an era that will go on for decades. And what will it enable? Well, if you're an existing company, you actually can learn new tricks. And I think old problems will have new solutions. And Nakanishi-san, you used the word smarter. Everyone can work smarter, and including improving society. So I'd like you to remember something. When I was at the World Economic Forum at Davos, Vice Premier Liu He was there. And there's something I remember he said, and it was a quote very clearly. He said, China's development model is changing from, is there enough, to, is it good enough? Is there enough to, is it good enough? That means manufacturing, transportation, you name it. And so this new moment, this idea that you could exponentially learn, I think it will help address many, if not all, of the challenges that you see here in China. These are not experiments, by the way. I'm going to share a couple examples. They're not experiments. These are real. These are not games. These are now companies embedding in what they really do and beginning to change. So healthcare was mentioned. Look, healthcare has greatly expanded here in China over the last decade. But let me take as an example cancer. It is still a growing problem. 1 in 5 deaths in China is cancer. 1 in 5. Now, any good doctor could never read 50,000 oncology papers that come every year, or medical data doubling. But with these technologies, artificial intelligence, you can. And this year, we are already working and in production with several Chinese hospitals using our artificial intelligence as Watson for oncology. Reads this information and actually is doing diagnosis and recommendation on treatments to help the doctor do a better job. We have already treated more than 10,000 patients here in China. Or smart infrastructure. We talked a lot about infrastructure. Roads, bridges, it doesn't matter, power stations. And this really makes sense of going from, is there enough, to is it good enough? So, think about that. How could you monitor the systems? We just had the industrial panel up here. How can you monitor systems, predict if they're fine, if they're good? In this case, data, again, will make every decision that is being made here in China better. So as an example, we talked a lot about how to reinvent factories, manufacturing 2025. Cognitive visual inspection that we built here in China, where you use AI to perhaps watch video cameras inspecting infrastructure, looking for defects, what has to be repaired. And we're doing that in water management plants here. But you can apply it to manufacturing. We're doing work with a flat panel display manufacturing company here, because this goes back to skills and labor. Inspecting a flat panel, it's a boring job. People don't want to do it. And in fact, turnover's high. But with these tools, you can help someone do a much better job. Now, that takes me to my last example, is what about food supply? You know, the first task of any country is to feed its people. Now, is there enough food here? I'm sure there is enough. So in that question on, is it good enough? That's in fact what the Vice Premier asked. So the question here is the quality of the food and the systems to transport it. Food contamination is a big issue around the world. 400,000 people die. Spotting the illness is a problem. But there are new technologies, blockchain is one of them, that will help here. And what it allows is transparent viewing of everyone, of what's happening. So we formed a food safety alliance, IBM did, with Walmart, with JD.com, with Tsinghua University, and it's applying blockchain for food distribution. So I give you, these are real in production here, but they are really just the beginning. Which then really takes me to my last point. This phenomena of data, it stands to be a wonderful opportunity, not only in China, but around the world. In fact, I've often said it is the opportunity of our time, but it could also be the issue of our time. The issue of our time. Which brings me to my third point, which is this inflection point for society now. I believe this era of technology and technologies, they must be ushered into the world with great stewardship. And I picked that word carefully, stewardship. There's a growing sense of concern of how data is used, privacy, breaches, AI, are the algorithms stolen? And IBM has been encouraging many companies to respond with thoughtful policies. Our experience, it's over 107 years, has taught us that no one will adopt a technology, no matter how advanced, if they don't understand it, believe it will work in their best interest, or if they don't trust it. So, what would I suggest? Well, this is why I believe we all need to live by a set of data principles. We're committed that these technologies are about augmenting man. In fact, there's many times I've wished AI was called augmented intelligence, not artificial intelligence. And we're committed to making AI explainable. It's not a black box. Make it transparent. And we do not commercialize our clients' data. It is their data. They own it as the creator. And we don't sell their insights that the AI generates on their behalf. We believe a client's knowledge is in fact their knowledge. And we're hopeful that others will take a harder look at this. But it's not just companies, I believe. Countries have an important role to play here too, to nurture these innovations. So we talked a lot about protecting intellectual property, or laws and rules that allow customers to buy the best technology no matter where it comes from. Now, these issues that we want to tackle, they're really international in scope when you talk about health, food supply, infrastructure. And we want to create an environment where all of us as companies can do our best work, which takes me to my closing. And it's actually a comment on IBM's long history in China, but as well as our future. And it really starts with a brief story. So you may, in fact, I'm sure you don't know this, that among the first people to ever lead an American delegation to the People's Republic of China was an IBMer. His name was Jack Howard, and he came here in 1972, but not in his capacity as a formal engineer for IBM. He was invited to Beijing because he was an expert tennis table player, otherwise known as ping pong, captain of the American ping pong tennis team. Now, this was before the United States and China had opened up formal relations. But before he left, Howard told the New York Times, and I quote, he was hopeful that table tennis would lead to a whole new diplomacy between the two countries. Now, as time would go by, he was right. Some of you might remember the competition that he took place in came to be known as ping pong diplomacy, and it led to actual diplomacy. This, in turn, was then followed by American corporations setting up shop in China. including IBM. And in fact, our chairman at the time in 1977 was Frank Perry. And following him, every other IBM CEO has been here. So why do I mention all of this? I mention it because, as IBMers, we believe we've always been here to help and look at how to find ways to solve problems, but problems that advance the march of human progress, including here in China. And we've been here from the very beginning of the US-China diplomatic and commercial relationship, and we will be here, working for the benefit of all people in both countries in the many, many years ahead. So I thank you.
Thank you, Ginny. Thanks very much, Ginny. So it's not really a coffee table model.
It's a little strange.
A little strange
yeah.
up here. But I do want to ask you a couple of questions. You talked about many fascinating things, the era, the inflection point of where we are. And I want to first come to this point of stewardship you mentioned, and what are the stewardship principles if you are a technology company in particular bringing new things in? One thing, privacy has obviously been a very big issue. It was talked about before in one of the panels on Saturday. But just your views on how you mentioned that about who owns it, but how we deal with that, and where you think that's going to lead to. Are we going to have regulation, or how do you think that would play?
I think in what I'm about to say, I believe applies to not just IT companies. I think it applies to all of us, because in every way, every company in this room is using technology. And so in this era, Dominic, I think there are three things we each have to do. One is we have to usher it in with purpose and transparency. So if you're going to use these technologies, you have to tell people you're using them, and they should never be surprised, and transparent. I mean, one of the biggest things with AI will be, well, who taught it? Where did that data come from? Just the internet? And as you make more and more important decisions, that will begin to matter. What data trained it? You can train bias. What data trained it, and who did the training? So the first one would be purpose and transparency. The second would be, which gets to your point on privacy, I think we all have to live by a set of data principles, which include things like ownership and privacy. Society is going to determine who they trust, and it will be by our actions. And so being, again, clear with people and letting people opt in, opt out, and that their ownership of the data does belong with the creator of the data. And then the third big thing, I think, for all of us, you mentioned it in the last panel, it's about skills. So I know you guys have done your study. I'm actually, regardless of the number of jobs displaced, there are many different predictions. I'm convinced 100% of jobs will change. And if 100% change, that is a huge responsibility for public-private partnership to address these skills, to prepare workers for that world. There'll be the youth that has to change, and we had the luncheon yesterday. I believe entirely this idea that you have to create jobs that are not all university-educated, tertiary education, or you will have unrest because there will not be people feeling they can participate in a new economy. You'll create have and have not. Then there'll be the retraining that Joe Kaiser talked about that has to happen, and then a role that government will play because people have to continue to learn through their life. So this is going to be about purpose and transparency, living by a set of data principles, and then preparing everyone to work in a world where it is man and machine, not man versus machine.
And just on the skills one, there was some passion on that from Joe and Dieter, as you said in the previous one, but I think the sense is not much has really happened institutionally. You can't look to a country to say they figured it out because we're in this era. What do we do? How do we do it at scale?
I love this topic. I've been in many panels with a number and each of these companies, almost everyone here is doing something on this topic. If you leave this topic to government alone everywhere in the world, it won't be solved. And I think there are many programs that people are using right now that are starting to scale. As an example, we coined a phrase called new collar. There's a stereotype that you have a blue-collar job or a white-collar job, right? And I think the future is going to be this idea of new collar. It's neither, and it's not a negative. So how do you prepare people to work with these technologies? And so when you say scalable ideas, public-private partnerships, We are now working in, let's see, almost a half a dozen countries in 120 schools with 50,000 children coming through a 6-year high school, if I put it in those terms, that have the kind of skills to live in this new era and not necessarily have to have a university or PhD degree and can do almost any job. And so I think these kinds of public-private partnerships, and many of the companies that have been up here all have these programs, and they are beginning to scale. And I think that's going to be one of the most important things, because if you think about these new technologies, Dominic, it's not about the technology itself. I mean, we have so many lessons from applying AI to business that are so different than AI to consumer. And AI in business, it's about changing how people do their work in the last mile. And that becomes to be a very human issue that you have to deal with.
And can I just keep going up for 1 second on that, just on the skills? Again, coming back to your new era, this era that we're moving into, an inflection point. You think about school, like 0 to 3. Again, we heard yesterday at lunch, the return on investment being the highest from 0 to 5. And I sort of think kindergarten was invented in, I think, 1890 by Bismarck as a kind of, if you look at a kindergarten in Manhattan today versus one, 70 years ago, maybe they have carbon fiber desks today, not wood, I'm exaggerating. But how do we change that, or do we need to? I'm presuming we do, but how do we think about K to 12 and, with this workforce coming into this new world where, as you say, it's new collar?
Yes. I believe that, yes, government will play its role, but companies can play a role in that too. And many of us are already participating in that 0 to 5 range with either its technologies that we're offering that get engagement between the parent and the child. And so I agree with what was said yesterday. And I actually believe with the resources that all of us have, along with government, this is infinitely solvable. People act as if this is not a solvable issue, and it is, that we can make a lot of headway. And that's why I say this could be the issue of our time if we don't address privacy, ownership, and address the skills issue around it. But there's a very clear roadmap on how to do that.
So very clear message on stewardship.
Stewardship.
Can I ask you one other category? I know I'm trying to limit myself, which is on, again, IBM, I think, is an amazing example of, an organization in the technology space that reinvents itself. And just talking to leaders of organizations, with all of this coming along, what are some of the things that you better get working on now? Is it, you mentioned the data, how do we manage that? Is it how you redesign what you do with the work? What are some of the areas? Because there's a ton of industries you talk about there that are going to change.
Yes, I think I would say a couple lessons learned. First off, as with any company in this room that transforms, on one part, everyone wants to talk about what you do, but the more interesting story is how you do your work and the skills of the people. That's always going to end up to be where the learnings are. And so with this new era, and it is an era, it isn't just AI, it isn't just data, because there will be more and more and more. It is about getting started now, though, because think of it, if your ultimate competitive advantage is learning, well, time matters, just like a child in school. If I get a couple years ahead of you, I'm going to have a sustainable advantage. And so this idea to crawl, walk, run with these technologies, I think is one of the biggest learnings, because time will matter. So everyone who thinks they can wait, I don't think it's a good idea. And you actually have it. All that data you have is some of the most, before now you couldn't make anything out of it. Now you can start to do something with it in an economical fashion. So that's one. But the other is, I think the other biggest learning is you have to change the way people do their work. I know as we've been working and have transformed IBM, one of the biggest things we did was move 360,000 people into an agile workforce and have them moved in co-location and using new tools and time and approaches. And so changing the way, and that will be true here in China, to change the way the work is done is probably the most limiting factor.
Right. And that's sort of in
or enabling factor.
A 5-year time, is what you've done in that time frame. Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you, Jeannie.
Thank you very much.
We'll move on. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Yeah.
所以这是完全自动驾驶的这样的一辆车啊，很快就会量产。当然呢，一开始它不会在完全开放的道路上来行驶，我们会选择一些相对比较封闭的区域，比如说景区，比如说码头，或者说公园什么这些地方，这个我们可以让人们首先尝试起来。这也就是说，无人驾驶技术呢，目前在开放道路上其实还没有成熟到可以完全的摆脱司机。但是呢，本身这个技术成长的速度是非常非常快的，每一天呢都会有新的进步。所以我们看呢，就是类似于这样的这个无人车，我认为呢，大概到3到5年的时间吧，就会真正的进入一个开放道路运行的状态。
It takes 3 to 5 years.
我们也觉得呢，就是自动驾驶
These autonomous cars will be fully implemented.
今天呢，就是无人驾驶如果出一个事故，
We
大家就都
also
非常非常
think
关
the
注。
autonomous cars will be a safer way for transportation. And you see today, even one single accident of the autonomous cars will raise great concern and attention from the public. It's just like if the dog bites the people, that's not news. But if the people bite the dogs, that's the news. And there is just one car in Uber who had accident. It can raise the whole world's concern. And with time goes by, people may realize that autonomous driving is safer than human driving. And Baidu is also working on the preventing the hurdles, and you can watch the video. So for some small animals, if they suddenly appear on the roads, the autonomous car can detect this and immediately stop. The autonomous cars is a very giant industry which includes services and suppliers, and also the OEMs and other chips manufacturers. So it's a very giant industry, and it's involved the cooperation between Chinese companies and Western companies. So all the people who are involved can benefit from this. We also see that the consumers in China are welcoming the new things. The users of bands in China are 20 years younger than in the West. The youngsters are more willing to receive the innovative things. And in China, 83% of the consumers recognize autonomous driving. This is much higher than foreign countries. So it will be faster in China to spread out autonomous driving. And many guests also mentioned AI can change many fields, almost every field. Like the made in China, we feel there will be more types of products. In the past, it may be a small home appliance, but now the fridge can be smart fridge. And in the past, we use remote control to the TVs, and now we can have a smart TVs. So AI can bring innovative products. And let's watch the video of the smart furnitures.
最左边那个人是谁？
吴刚，内地男演员，代表作品。
Who is the person on the left?
那最右边呢？
The domestic actor.
代表作品。
And who is on the right? Chun Shanshan, a Chinese actor. Please turn to the tank episode.
是谁作曲的？
坦克漂移，约瑟夫
What's
特
the
雷
background
尼斯
music? And who is the composer?
帮我搜索所有有关吴京的电影，要和《战狼》同一题材的。
Please search the films of Wu Jing, and which is of the same similar topics of War Wolf.
是事实，就是你们可以在这个公开的市场上买到。
This is not a demo, it's a reality.
摆脱遥控器了。
You can buy this smart TV on the market,
听得懂很多
and they can mostly
明白的。
relieve from the remote control, and they have more functions than the remote
中国制
control.
造2025啊，我们觉得就是中国制造应该从制造就 manufacturing 到
We mentioned the China made 2025.
这其中最主要的这个 smartness。
We transfer from manufacturing to smart
任何一个
manufacturing.
将来人类制造出来
The
的
essence here
device，
is
那么
smartness,
它都
which
应该
means
有一个接口
it can understand people's language. So in the future, each device made by human beings can understand human
学
language.
习如何使用工具。其实车
Since the inventory of
都
tools,
要花1个月左右的时间
people are
考虑
learning
学
to
车去
use
驾照。那么
tools.
未来呢，其实所有
We
的
can
设备
take
都
cars
新的
as the
动作
example.
那么
It takes a month to learn to drive. And in future, because the cars can understand people's language,
会使得中国制造呢
the people don't need to learn to use tools.
当然 AI 呢，除了对于这个消费端会有
And
大
this
的
can
影响
help
之外呢，对于
improve
工具端
the
也会有
Made in
非常
China
其
2025.
实刚才也是好几
Apart from this,
我们看一
it
下
will
就是
also
AI 怎么来帮助
benefit the supply side. Let's watch another video for AI's application in energy industry.
海上风机的体量非常巨大，一旦发生故障、停运等等，就可能造成每天高达数十万的经济损失。海上的交通呢，又受制于气候、气象、洋流等等外界因素的制约，对于备品备件的运输、对于人员的运维都会有相对于陆上风场要造成更高的代价。目前，百度云致力于声音系统，建立了一套远程传输和存储的体系及故障预测的模型。目前80%以上的故障，我们可以通过远程方式来解决，并且可以提前48小时做到对风机机械故障的精准预测，并且预测的成功率已经可以达到85%以上。
所以 AI 是可以大幅度的提升这个弊端的这个企业的工作或者是。
So we can see AI can really reduce the shortages.
像最近呢，就是北京市
And in terms of policy, China is very open. Recently, Beijing has opened 105 kilometers of roads to the testing of autonomous driving. This is a great achievement. Because Beijing is not a simple city, Beijing has a population of over 20 million people, and it's the capital city and a giant city in China. But it can offer this long road for the autonomous driving testing. You can see this is really favorable condition and policy. This can effectively promote the autonomous driving. Apart from policy, China has another two advantages. The first is talent. China is the largest country in the world with human resources. Chinese people are diligent. People are willing to work in overtime. So this can also contribute to China's development. And third is data. We have 700 million internet users, and every day there are numerous data generated. And the Chinese people love the same culture, and we follow the same laws and conduct. So this data can help train the robots model. So China is really blessed with AI development. And Baidu hope to take advantage of China and work with the companies worldwide to build a more prosperous and sound ecosystem and to make the complicated world more simplified. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robin. We just have a bit of time for a couple of questions on here. Again, the new era that Ginny talked about, we saw with the video live what you're doing. I wanted to just focus a bit on the government policy side. Yeah. You mentioned the streets in Beijing. What is the role of government in enabling this change to occur? What do you see as some of the key features of that?
Yeah, I think government plays the most important role in terms of building an infrastructure that's friendly for AI. In terms of autonomous driving, they can build roads that only for cars, not for pedestrians. That will make autonomous driving much easier. They can install sensors on those traffic lights so that we don't need to use camera to really recognize those lights. We can just receive signals from the infrastructure work. There are lots of things that the government can do on the infrastructure side. They can also make policies that's friendly to innovation, and they can subsidize companies who are willing to adopt newer technology. China has a strong government, and I think they have fully realized the potential of AI, so they will play a very important and positive force in terms of adoption of AI in all kinds of industries.
One is infrastructure and enable, sort of supporting, subsidizing where it's needed to do it. What about on this data issue? We've talked about it before, privacy and so forth. You know, a lot of healthcare reform requires, you know, or innovation would be using the data that people have. How do you sort of see that evolve? How we use data to be able to, as Ginny said, I think 20% of the data is on the internet, 80% are in companies, but how do we, what's your view on that?
I think, yeah, like Ginny said, when you are able to join different set of data, the power becomes much more. It's exponential growth. But in the meantime, we are very aware of the privacy issue, or how do we safeguard the data. I think over the past few years, China has become increasingly more aware of this problem and have been enforcing the relevant laws more definitively and strongly. But in the meantime, I think the Chinese people are more open or less sensitive about the privacy issue. If they are able to trade privacy for convenience, for safety, for efficiency, in a lot of cases, they're willing to do that. For us, we obey a set of principle in the sense that if we think using the data will benefit the user who owns the data, and the user agrees that the data can be used, we'll use it. So I think that's a basic measure for us of what can be done and what shouldn't be done.
Right. Yeah. And maybe just a question on how it seems like there's a lot of innovation in an innovative company. How much do you spend on research, or what amount of time or money, your own time? Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we are a technology company. We think technology is probably the most important factor for our growth. We spend about 15% of our total revenue each year on R&D. So it's a big chunk. It's more than 10 billion RMB a year, and it will continue to grow. In the age of AI, I think this is very much warranted, because talent is very important, I have pointed out during my presentation, and talent is not cheap. It's actually expensive, and we're willing to pay a higher price. When we hire someone from Silicon Valley back to Beijing, we would typically give them 15% more compensation. And when someone from Beijing who wants to work in our Silicon Valley office, we will probably usually decrease their salary by 15% because, the market is here. And based here will be more productive, at least for a company like Baidu. So we're very willing to pay the right price for the right talent.
Thank you. Well, I think I'm getting the signal we're running out of time here. I would love it if we had more time to also open it up and have discussions. But thank you so much, Robin, for your presentation and discussion.
All right. Thank you.
I'm going to wrap up. That wraps up this session. I think Ginny summed it up best. But we're in a new era. I will have to give you one quote. It's from E.O. Wilson, who is an entomologist who studied ants at Harvard, but knows a lot. And apparently there are 4 species that have survived the longest on Earth. That's ants, termites, bees, and humans. And he studies a lot about why that's the case, and it's how people take care of themselves, those species, through generations and through each other, particularly through era changes. And he has a quote which is, "We are living in a world of Star Wars technology with medieval institutions and primitive emotions." I think there's lots of opportunities, though, to improve that and be optimistic. Thank you very much.